everything we have comes to us by God's grace. This is the foundation of the Blessings Project. We keep track of these blessings by keeping a household budget and good financial records. To acknowledge that everything we have is actually His, we return a tithe to Him of our increase. Now, there's still 10% we need to deal with before we can get to using the budget itself. We're going to call this paying yourself. Now, keeping yourself busy at work is biblical living. The Lord Himself has enshrined the dignity of honest labor in the 10 Commandments. While the 4th commandment is often spoken of in the context of a Sabbath rest day, most forget that the rest of the Sabbath is appropriate only for someone who has worked. Exodus 20 verse 9 states, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. That's one of the 10 commandments, to labor for 6 days. The Apostle Paul states it even more bluntly in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 10, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. Now, this labor is not some get-rich-quick scheme or some talk people out of their money scheme. It's actual labor. Proverbs 14:23 states that in all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury or poverty. Proverbs 28:19, he that tilleth his land shall have plenty of bread, but he that followeth after vain persons shall have poverty enough. In Proverbs 13:11, wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. When you worked hard and can see the fruits of your labor, you then need to reward yourself. How are you going to reward yourself for your hard work? I want to suggest that you do this by paying yourself. The concept of paying yourself is a hard one for people to grasp. You worked hard, you got your paycheck, and now you want to spend it. But instead of that, Scripture tells us that you should appreciate your hard work by setting aside a portion of it for the future. In Proverbs 6:6-8, it says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest." This is not speaking of a savings fund for a new house or car. It's stating that you should have something in reserve, so when your work years pass, you can live your golden years in financial peace and hopefully even have something to pass on to your children. Paying yourself by setting aside at least as much as you return to the Lord in the tithe is the principle that we're going for. That is to say, at least another 10% of your income. Most American families will go into retirement without financial peace of mind. They will spend their golden years in constant financial fear. And Social Security just won't cut it. It was never meant to completely fund a person's retirement, but to augment their savings. As of January 2017, the average retired worker's benefit from Social Security was $1,363 per month, or just over $16,000 a year. But with most people now going into retirement still holding debt, this amount nowhere near covers living expenses and the servicing of their debts. Do not be one of those people. Make your budget and live your life as if there was no Social Security coming. Then, when you retire, you'll be secure, and any Social Security you get will be a bonus for a life well lived and well planned. You may think you don't have the money to pay yourself, but making cuts to other portions of your budget to have this 10% will give you an amazing peace of mind as you see that savings increase from month to month and year to year. After a long time, interest rates are going back up. Let's say a family is earning a meager $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. Let's say that's it. If a family on this meager income set aside 10%, $1,200 a year, and let this money earn 6% interest compounded annually, they would only earn $72 the first year. But after 5 years, they would have invested $6,000 in principal and have a balance in the account of $8,370. After 10 years, they would have set aside $12,000 in principal and have a savings account balance of $17,966. That's almost $6,000 in profit in 10 years. And after 15 years, they would have set aside $18,000 in principal, but have an account balance of $30,807. You need to think about saving for the future. This is a biblical principle. Consider the ant. Consider her ways. She plans when she has for the time when she will not. And this is what we need to do. Now, in addition to setting aside funds and paying yourself, it is essential that you have an emergency fund. A 2016 study from the University of Chicago showed that 2/3 of Americans would struggle to come up with just $1,000 to cover an emergency. Like the car breaks down, the car that you need to get to work. And if you're like most Americans, you couldn't fix it. Or you would need to go into debt to fix it. What was most shocking about the study is that this was not only true for low-income households. 2/3 of households making $100,000 a year were also unable to get a hold of $1,000 of cash at a moment's notice without getting into debt. You want to live with a margin of security. For most families, this means setting aside money in a separate saving account that amounts to between 2 and 3 months of budget needs. For example, if all your regular monthly budgeted items come to $3,000, you should have an emergency reserve of $6,000 to $9,000 available to cover your budget in case of emergency without getting into debt. Ecclesiastes 11 verse 2 says, "Give a portion to 7 and also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth." In the event of illness, job loss, or some other emergency, you will be able to face the emergency without the stress of figuring out how to pay the bills. You may not be able to set this aside right away, right now, as you're learning these principles. But add this item to your budget and set funds aside until you reach this emergency savings target. According to an analysis from the Urban Institute, even a small emergency fund of $250 to $750 was able to help families avoid eviction, having their utilities cut off, and other financial pitfalls. Start small if you have to, but start saving. You need financial peace of mind. Pay yourself. Reward yourself. Proverbs 22 verse 3 says, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished."